right. Thanks again for coming. I'm Christy Goldsmith. I'm the Assistant Director of the Campus Writing Program, and I am maybe the most avid Google fan on campus. So when we were starting to talk about what workshops to host in the spring semester, we thought, how about some really short, really practical workshops on all that Google can offer? And so we thought the first one that would be really fun is Jamboard. So I'm excited that you're here with us. Also joining me from the Campus Writing Program today is Director Dr. Amy Lannon. I see that she's in our Conley house that we miss terribly. Coordinator, Dr. Julie Burt. Our brand new Graduate Research Assistant, Keisha Avery. And our project coordinator, Jackie Thomas, who is the one that has organized all of this for us and will clean up the recording and put it on our website. All right, so in the chat, I want to put it in here one more time. And then if anyone else comes in, my colleagues can put it in here for us. That should be, hopefully that works. Didn't get all the copy and paste. That is a link to the Jamboard we're going to be working from today. So what I thought might be most useful is to show you how Jamboard works by sharing a Jamboard with you and having a little bit of chance to play around with it. So in short, here's what I hope that we can get done today. I hope that we can have a little fun time testing out Jamboard, kind of playing around with it, seeing how I think it's super easy to navigate. And then I'd like to share with you a few ways I've used it in my own teaching, both with younger students, so with 9-12, and also with my college students and graduate students even as well. And then I thought we could go through the nuts and bolts of the Jamboard platform. So where do you click to get what you want, how to access things and share things as well. And then, of course, I hope there'll be time for questions and ideas. I have the 30 minutes after this open. So if anyone wants to hang around, I'm happy to answer questions there as well. So let's get started. If you've been to any campus writing program workshop, you know that we love John Bean. And so anytime I want to find a justification for something fun to do, I go straight to John Bean's book, and he always has something for me. And today what I found was this lovely quote where he talks a little bit about critical thinking. So we know right now critical thinking is a challenge because everyone's exhausted, we're stressed, we're living through these traumatic times. And John Bean points out a problem with critical thinking in the classroom. So here's what he says. A key observation among teachers of critical thinking is that students, when given a critical thinking problem, tend to reach closure too quickly. And so he says to deepen students' thinking, teachers need to build into their courses time, space, tools, which is what we'll think about today, and motivation for exploratory thinking. This sort of exploratory thinking is exactly what WI courses really access, right? And using those writing to learn strategies. And I think Jamboard is the perfect place for us to do critical thinking tasks and also do these informal writing tasks. Also, the cool thing about Jamboard is that you can just drop images in there really easily. So I wanted to show you a picture of our Conley house where Amy's currently working. We're in there one at a time these days. But when normal times come again, soon in the future, you'll find us at 6th and Conley. So come visit us there. All right, so let's give this a try. So here's what you'll need to do. If you are looking at the Jamboard on your own screen, so again, it's in the chat, you want to open it up there. You need to, on the top here, you see where mine says 2 of 10. So right up here, it says 2 of 10. You need to navigate to the second slide in this Jamboard. And when you get to the second slide, you'll know you're in the right place because you'll see this question. What are your favorite uses for Post-it notes in your teaching, research, work, or home life? I love Post-it notes, right? So here's what you'll do. On the left-hand side of this menu, there is a little button that looks like a little Post-it note. It is the 4th one down. So when I click on it, it will pull up a note that looks just like this. And I'm going to say, I love to use Post-it notes for grocery lists. And I'm going to change the color because that's fun. And then when you hit this save button, there it appears. And so to make this go away, you can literally just click off, or you can add another couple one. All right. So there we go. Oh, daily to-do list, more grocery lists. Excellent. Let's take 90 seconds and tell me, what do you like to use Post-it notes for? This is excellent. So here, if you'll finish the one that you're on, oh, they're coming everywhere. It's wonderful. Oh, you're figuring out how to move them. Great. See how easy it is? So if you will take a second then and help me sort these, can you practice moving them by sorting them into categories? So putting to-do list, you got it together. Things to accomplish maybe goes with to-do list. Sort them into categories. I love these. I love the notes to kiddos and lunch boxes. That's wonderful. Dinner ideas, grouping ideas and organizing them. We have a faculty member on our board who uses Post-it notes as a way to keep track of his writing and research projects. And so you can literally see the Post-it note list grow as he moves them around, which is pretty neat. All right, so as you can see, it is super user-friendly. The neat thing about Jamboard is that it's really easy to enter into Jamboard. It doesn't have all the functionality of, say, a Google Docs or a Google Slides, but it's so easy to enter into, and it's so fun and collaborative. The one challenge is when I get a lot of students, this is a perfect size group. When I get my class of 26 students all doing this at once, it becomes kind of a mess because, as you noticed, they kind of all enter right here, right in this upper left corner. And so I'm usually in there moving things around. Another thing that you can do is create multiple slides. So you might say, if your name is A through M, you'll go to slide 1. If you're N through Z, you go to slide 2 or whatever, right? So we're going to talk all about the nuts and bolts of this, and I will answer that question, Valerie. The short answer is no, they do not. But we'll talk about the nuts and bolts of sharing and how to put it in your Canvas site and all of that here in a second. But I thought before we do that, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about how I use it in my classroom to get those juices flowing to think of how you might want to use it in your classroom. So you can still see my screen, right? I moved the window. Okay, good. Sometimes it's a challenge. So a few ideas here of the way that I've used this even just last week, and I'm on slide 3 of 10, so I'm just going to click through these up here, is I have used it for my students to do a reading response. In my class, they have to read, students read multiple readings per week, and I ask them to synthesize them or bring them all together in some way with a question or a theme or something that they find interesting. And it gets kind of tedious for them and for me because they do these reading responses all throughout the semester to do a traditional essay every time. And so this time I asked them to do a reading response in Jamboard, and the responses were phenomenal. So here's what I gave them. I said, what I'd like you to do is make sure to have a synthesizing statement. I'd like you to group together by the text that you're reading, include some images that would help you think about the text. And so here's one student who gave me permission to share. He came up with this all on his own. He took 2 different texts that we had. One was kind of about rigor in the classroom, and one was about accessible texts. And he put them together in this balancing act idea. So he really synthesized what I wanted him to synthesize, which, by the way, they were not doing a good job of that in the traditional essay. I really got frustrated because I kept saying, make sure you synthesize, bring it together. And they weren't able to do it. But they, almost all of them, I'd say like 23 out of 26 did it in this Jamboard. It was so much fun. This is from a future history teacher, undergraduate. Another way I like to use these is to help activate or provide prior knowledge that students might need to make their way through the unit. So we were talking in this class as a sample text, we were thinking about the causes of the Holocaust, which is a really complex question, right? There's lots of reasons why that atrocity happened. And so I asked students to start just like I asked you by putting Post-it notes on there. And then I asked them to move things around. And then one student, because they're so much better at this than we are, they figured out that you can make little circles here, and they started grouping them in these circles, and they made it a process, and then they changed colors. It was so really neat. So then we went to our unit and we really thought about what of these questions or these themes can the text answer? What questions do we still have? It was a really nice place for us to come together and kind of see where we all were on that subject. This is another student sample lesson, and I predominantly teach pre-service teachers, so they're learning how to teach their own K-12 students. And so this was actually one of their lessons, and they gave me permission to share this. But this is from last semester when the New Yorker was doing these beautiful covers of the pandemic situation we were all living in. And so what these students did was provided the New Yorker cover and this question. And they asked their students to think about what is the purpose of this image, of this visual text, and what contributes to it. And so all of these notes we're imagining taking this to a high school class. We're kind of responding like high school students here. But all of these notes helped answer that question. They did this a few times, and their noticings got so much stronger and more interesting by the third or fourth cover they looked at. And then finally, I used this with my graduate class as well. And I was surprised that of all the students, my graduate students took it up the most enthusiastically. And one of them even has created this giant Jamboard to help her think about her dissertation chapter. So she has like a new slide for every chapter and she's mapping things out. But what I asked them to do here is revisit the reading that they had already done. So this was the reading they did before they came to class, and then pull out a phrase that was impactful and stick it on there, just like you would if you were taking notes with a sticky note. And then we move things around, and you can really see the three things that they all agreed on, a class of 20 graduate students of all different disciplines, were these three things. So it was really interesting for us to see that we all kind of find our way to the same main ideas. That was really powerful, especially for this interdisciplinary class. I'll pause for a second and ask if you have any questions or awesome ideas for using Jamboard in your classroom, just the teaching part, and then we'll get to the nuts and bolts part here second. All right, well, as you think of them, throw them in the chat because we want to hear your ideas as well. But it might be helpful for you to see how this works before you really think about how to use it in your classroom, right? Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that you can't click on links in Jamboard. This is a limitation, so it will not turn a URL into, this is going to need another letter. Oh, there we go. It will not turn a URL into a clickable link. That's just a limitation of it. So I don't use it for things that they need to put a bunch of links. But to get to Jamboard, you literally go to jamboard.google.com. And here's where the Google account question comes in. You need a Google account to start a Jamboard. So you as the teacher would need one. You do not need a Google account to interact with the Jamboard. So when you go to this URL, Google will prompt you to log in. I still use my personal Gmail because I have years and years of stuff there. But what you do need to know is that Mizzou's email addresses are now set up to work with the Google Suite. This means you will not get Gmail through your Mizzou address, but you can use your Mizzou address to sign into Google Docs and Google Forms and Google Jamboard. Now realize this is why I haven't done it yet. That creates a whole new Google account for you, right? So all your other Google stuff would not be in there. You'd have to share it with that, which is just a little bit of work on the back end. But if you don't have a lot of Google stuff, I would recommend making your Mizzou address a Google address, and it's super easy. It's like 4 clicks and you have it done. So that's the good news. The other good news is if you get stuck in trying to use this, you're welcome to reach out directly to me. But also this is an IT supported app now. So you can reach directly out to your IT folks and they can help you navigate that as well. Okay, so we have logged into Google theoretically, right? You don't have to do it with me. You can just listen. And then we end up with a brand new Jamboard. So here's the neat thing about Jamboard. You can set the background to whatever you want. You can also set it to a picture. So if I want students to really think about an image or deconstruct an image, I'm thinking how useful this might be in the science classes to put a science image there and have them add notes around it, right? I can set a background image, or I can set images of whatever color I want here, and they have fun with that as well. They're really some neat options there. Let's look at the menu on the left-hand side. So I always set the background first, and then I use whatever I want on the left-hand side. So this is the pen, which literally is one of those, like you can draw circles and arrows. It always looks ugly because I don't know about you, but I don't have good trackpad handwriting. But that's neat if you're trying to do some teaching and you want to draw attention to something. Something that's also really neat and Jamboard specific is here at the very bottom. This is what they call a laser. It's like a laser pointer and it like goes away. So if you wanted to use Jamboard to present, you could do that. Or if you wanted to highlight one of the sticky notes, you can do that, which is useful in online teaching, I think. Then we have erase, which is pretty self-explanatory, and select. So to help us move things around, we can hit select. You already discovered the sticky note. You can make them any color that's listed here or also no color on the background. This is where you would add an image. So, oops, I'm gonna move your faces out of the way so I can cancel it. There we go. This is where you would add an image. So to get this image, I clicked that add an image button, and you can search via Google or you can search via your computer. So that's the neat way that my students have used visual text. This is really fun. So I did not know this existed until a week ago when my students taught me. If you click on the circle, it gives you a circle. If you click on the circle twice, it gives you all these other shapes that you can use to organize things. So it can be really neat to think about what goes in what box. And then they're easy to delete. You can just select them and delete them. This is a text box. So this text that I have created that doesn't have a little sticky note around it, that's the text box. Here's something else we discovered this week. The sticky notes only allow so much text. When you hit that text limit, it goes outside the box and then it looks ugly and no one likes it. So if you want more text, then you'll want to use this text box option. Let's see what else we have here. So in the upper right-hand corner, here, we'll do this first. In the center, you can see that it looks like a regular PowerPoint slide. So when I click on it, I can move through all my slides. I can move slides around if I want to. I can add a new slide. It took me kind of a minute to figure out how to do that. So this option, whoops, and then I usually click off of it, but it now won't let me click off. There we go. This expand frame bar is where you can add and remove slides. The question about how to get it to students is going to be via share. And so here's something Google has done. This is my one complaint with Google, and that is they've made it 2 clicks to get it so students can actually access this. So rather than share with your students in the share box, you want to get the link. But what it's going to default to is restricted. So it's going to say only people added can open the link, and then you're going to copy the link and send it, and it's not going to work, right? So the first click is you have to change it to anyone with the link. And then the second click is to make sure that everyone can edit it. So you got kicked off because I changed it. Sorry about that. Those 2 steps are important if you want them to be able to add sticky notes. So they can only add sticky notes if you click editor. They cannot add sticky notes if they're a viewer. If you'd like to use it just to present, then you can use it in the view mode and they can see it however they like. Let's see, what else is here? Okay. We had a few issues, and I'll show you how it integrates with Canvas, which is pretty handy. We had a few issues in my most recent assignment where students just couldn't get the sharing permissions to work. I don't know if it was user error or Google error, but something else that's neat is you can download it as a PDF, or you can save one particular frame as an image. So if they run into issues with sending you the link and the link sharing doesn't work, they can do it either of those ways as well. Questions about the navigation?
So Christy, just a real quick question. When you're doing the images, like you have the pictures there and you wanted to, let's say, type something into there, that's when you would then use the text box on top of that?
That is correct. Let's actually practice that. So what my students taught me, this is all them, is they added this image and then they added the text box on top of it, and then they can type whatever you want. And this text box will expand. You can make it as big or as small as you want, and you can make it fit however you want.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Any more questions? I have some really cool examples. I didn't ask everyone for permission, but there were so many great examples. One chose to have like this sparkly background. I was like, how did that happen? Where did you get the sparkly background? That was so cool. And she's like, oh, it's just an image. I just set the image as the background. So you can literally set any image as the background. Another one used the image to kind of show me about her discipline and then use the text to push back to that. So it was this really neat sort of interaction between text and image. I think it's really neat when we can play with these different elements of visual images. Okay, let's see. I have one more thing to tell you, and then I want to know your ideas. So I'm gearing up here for you to tell me your ideas. Here is how this works with Canvas. I know you can't read this. It doesn't matter. What you need to know is that when you go to make an assignment, if you would like students to submit a link, which is really the best way to interact with any sort of website, especially Google website, is having them submit the link as their assignment. That way it shows up in the preview and you can click to open it in another tab. And so I can show you that here shortly if that's interesting. So I just wrote my assignment here and you can see what I wrote. And then the important part is down here. Ooh, let me use the laser. Here we go. The important part is down here. And that is when you allow them to submit, you want to make sure they can not only do a file upload, which is what I normally default to in Canvas, but they also can upload a website URL. That will allow them to put that sharing link that I showed you in there. And then when you go into Canvas, it'll show like a little preview, or it might say sometimes preview not available, and you open it in a new tab. This is also where if they run into issues with the sharing, you'll learn, and you probably already know this, that most students are pretty good with Google because they came from Google high schools, right? So they kind of have gotten used to using Google in this way. But if you have someone who's unfamiliar with it, you can ask them to submit a PDF, because again, you are able to go here, download as PDF, and then they can upload it just like a regular file. All right, I'm going to stop sharing because you have that access, and I'm going to answer questions that I see are coming in the chat. Thanks for that, Valerie. Great question. So Valerie asked, how have you helped students transition from Jamboard short form writing to longer essays? This is, I think, the time-honored question in WI in general, right? How do we do these informal short pieces that grow into a more formal piece? I like to help them think about Jamboard as concept maps. So you saw the one where we had the groupings in different circles. I like to say, let's do a little thinking. Let's then go do a little research. Let's incorporate the research onto our Jamboard in whatever way we can. So throwing a little quote on there, a little paraphrase, some citations, and then let's figure out where to start writing. So pick one of those categories. Maybe we call that your first body paragraph or your first section, and start typing away. My dissertation was entirely written from giant concept maps on my wall. I mean, like giant, like all over my wall. So I actually think that Jamboard and concept maps can be like an outline skipping process. We can go straight from the concept mapping and the thinking to, that's great to hear, to the actual writing. I actually cut up my pencil and paper mind maps, and I would write from a little section and be like, today's goal for dissertation is this, right? And that was pretty helpful. Yeah, I would show you, I have a million Jamboards in my Jamboard to show you, but one of my students who's getting a PhD in linguistics, she said that exact same thing. She's like, my head, there's just so much going on. And so she threw it all on a Jamboard, and then she was able to make it more manageable. Let's see another question. Do you think Jamboard might be better than PowerPoint for team presentations? Yeah, and more interactive on Zoom. These are great questions. Now, you're remembering that I loathe Microsoft and love Google. So you are asking the wrong person, because I will always say, yes, Jamboard's better. I like Google Slides still for presentations, just because I like to be able to like add cute little transitions and stuff. But if the goal really is to get students to write less and talk more, PowerPoint and Google Slides let you put big paragraphs in there, right? Jamboard almost doesn't let you do that. There's not enough room for many big paragraphs. So I think I might use Jamboard in those presentations where I really want to force them to talk to me and not read from the PowerPoint, which sometimes can be awful, right? It is super interactive on Zoom. In fact, I tweeted about how wonderful my students' responses were last week. I was like, these Jamboard responses are awesome. And one of my former students tweeted me back, and she was like, I loved when you let us use Padlet and Jamboard. So it seems to be something that students really like on Zoom. I will also tell you, here's a little extra for your money, that Padlet is my other favorite interactive piece. It has more capability, but it's not supported by campus. It's free. You get 3 free ones, and it's also super easy to use, but it's not one that integrates into Google. So yes, interactive on Zoom. We do a little bit on Padlet or Jamboard. We go do something in class, then we go back and add and move things around. So it's been really fun. Great question.
So Christy,
yeah.
Yeah, so I know that one of your go-to lessons over the years has been tabletop Twitter. And it seems to me that Jamboard could allow tabletop Twitter to happen in a virtual space. Is that how you've also used it? And I guess that's kind of what you're describing anyway, but I just to throw that out there.
Yeah, in fact, I've used Padlet for that, but you can definitely use Jamboard for this. So let me see if I can show you what Amy's talking about here. I'm pulling it up. Where's the link? There we go. Yeah, so tabletop Twitter is essentially asking students to look at a text, a common text, and talk around it, and they do it without physically talking. And online, I've done this really effectively in Padlet. So I put the link in there. You should be able to access it and see what students have done, because it allows you to make a lot of connections. A nice way as a way to get into this more complicated thing that I showed you might be Jamboard, right? So kind of including that image there, asking them to use some Post-it notes, and then maybe taking it a step further in small groups or something like that. Were you able to see that link that I put in there? Yeah. So this is my class earlier this semester. We already did this semester. Yeah, where they can respond to each other and make comments. Super cool. What other ideas do you have, or questions or wonderings do you have? Well, it sounds like we are in good shape here. That was a lot of information in 30 minutes, but we sure like these 30 minutes events because they are respectful of your time. If you liked this, just wait. Next is going to be Google Sheets with our Dr. Julie Burt, because as much as I love Google, I'm not trusted with spreadsheets. I'm not very good with spreadsheets, but Julie's great with spreadsheets. And so on March 9th, I put the event in there at 2:30. She'll have a little 30-minute explainer of how she uses Google Sheets in her class. And then we'll move on to Google Docs as hyperdocs, kind of as handouts that students can have all these clickable link options. And we'll finish up with Google Forms, which is my favorite way to do informal quick surveys in the class. Well, we want to be respectful of your time. We'll end 3 minutes early, thanks to my coffee intake this morning. But we'll stick around if you have any questions or if you want to chat about ideas. Thanks so much for coming.